Mr Chair. I just want to bring back a few things that have been raised by the opposition, in particular the complete ranting that seems to occur about the lack of a plan that our government seems to have for the economy. And I just want to go back to those 6 key things that people keep forgetting about. This government is spending more on infrastructure than anyone's ever spent before. We're spending more on education than anyone's ever spent before. We're spending plenty of money more on innovation, with the Minister Matt sitting in front of me. We're spending plenty of money in terms of turning around and getting rid of the wasteful lack of resources in terms of bureaucrats that we are seeing. And we're doing plenty of effort in terms of getting crime and things in place. That's the key parts of the government's economic plan. Mr Speaker, this report we're debating about today was released in early February. The key aspect of what happened between now and then was on 22nd of February, the town that I grew up in and was born in suffered a tragedy, a massive tragedy that has probably lost the lives of somewhere in the region of 180 people. New Zealand has changed as a result of that, and my hometown has changed as a result of that. We need to think very carefully about what that might mean for the go-forward future for our fiscal accounts. And there's been much debate by many people on the other side about some of the options and choices that gives us. For me, Mr Speaker, we have limited choices. We have to rebuild Christchurch. Christchurch is what makes up about 1/6 of the New Zealand economy. And it's a situation where it not only makes up 1/6 of our economy, it's actually much more productive part of the economy than other parts of New Zealand. More exports come out of Canterbury than almost any other part of New Zealand, and much higher levels of exports per capita than any other part of New Zealand. And this tragedy that we have incurred is going to cost our country in the region of about $15 billion. We're very lucky, Mr Chair, in that most of that actually is insured money that will be paid for by the people being prudent and taking insurance contracts in place. Some has to come from the government. And I think, Mr Chair, that's one of the key reasons why we are starting to make some key decisions, and some tough key decisions, about our choices in the future. You see, Mr Chair, we don't have a giant piggy bank of money that sits there to pay for things. We don't have it. Well, I wish we did. You know, we've made some choices in the past, which means we don't have a giant piggy bank of money. So we have to make some tough choices of how we're going to pay for that $15 billion collectively. Now, what we think, Mr Chair, there are some options that are in place for us to make some tough calls and spend it on the things that make most sense. Mr Chair, I was fortunate that recently we've had a series of community meetings in Christchurch in the last 2 weeks. They've been attended in total by about 3,000 people. And I can tell you, Mr Chair, what the feeling of those people actually are. Those people actually have quite strong feelings about the future of Christchurch and about the role of the government in that. I know that the gentleman currently sitting in the chair sat in one of the smallest of those meetings and listened to some of those people's views and opinions. They are worried and concerned about their futures in New Zealand, and they want guidance from the government to be able to provide to them some clarity of what will happen to their jobs, to their homes, to their families, their schools, their roads, and everything else that makes up their life in this country. And Mr Chair, this government is one that's going to provide that. And yes, that'll mean that sometime in the future there'll be some tough decisions made about things that we probably don't really need right now, because there are some other things that we do really need right now and then will need to be rebuilt. They're like the schools in my area, which kids cannot go to at the moment. There's like the sewage system that is currently floating through the river, the Avon River. About 80% of the sewage currently from Christchurch is floating through the Avon River, through our wetlands and out through the beach. It's like the forest that I normally go mountain biking through, Mr Chair. It's currently got 240,000 tonnes of silt and demolition materials in it. That's a massive recreation area that 800,000 people a year used to visit going through. Mr Chair, these are the things that we have to fix before we can get back to growing our economy the way we want it to go. You see, Mr Chair, it seems remarkable that despite all the things that have happened in the last 2.5 years, a global recession, a global credit crunch, a series of one-off economic disasters ranging from our first earthquake to our second earthquake to Pike River in between, that we seem to have an opposition that seem to think nothing has changed. It's a bit like a drunken sailor who keeps going from town to town, spending his money everywhere he goes. Then he suddenly spends everything, turns up to the next place and thinks he can borrow money from his mate. Then he turns around and thinks he can borrow money from his other mate, turns up home, borrows it from his mum and dad, and still thinks he can keep spending the way he has been spending in every single town. Well, Mr Chair, we can't keep doing that, and we have to think very carefully, and that's one of the reasons why this government is taking prudent positions and prudent decisions on the way forward. And I think that's the wise decision to make, not just for me, but for my children. Those decisions will mean my children stay in New Zealand in times to come. And those are the reasons why we have to rebuild our country, and particularly build my home city the way we really want it to be. Because that's not going to be easy, Mr Chair. The easy option is to jump on a plane and leave to Australia. The tough decisions are to stay here and make New Zealand the way we all want it to be. And for my hometown in particular, that's going to be a long or hard road. Thank you.